I'm Chris Vavra, and I'm the Web Content Manager for CFE Media and Technology. Today, I'm going to discuss the ultra-low voltage motor and drive market with two thought leaders from Interact Analysis, a CFE Media and Technology content partner. We'll discuss the market's growth, its future, and what impact it will have on manufacturers and end users in the short and long term. Now, let me introduce the two thought leaders from Interact Analysis. Blake Griffin is a research manager for Interact Analysis as an expert in automation systems and industrial digitalization. Since joining the company in 2017, he has written and presented on many topics, including motors and drives, hydraulics, and predictive maintenance. Brianna Jackson is a research analyst who has done research on motors and drives and robotics and sustainability since joining Interact Analysis in 2021. Jackson also did a recent interview with CFE Media and Technology in June on the mobile robot component market, which will be linked below if you want to learn more about what's happening in that industry. Welcome, Blake and Brianna, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
So I guess we'll start off with this. Just so everybody is familiar with this topic, can you explain or define what an ultra low voltage motor or motor and drive means in terms of terminology?
Yeah, sure. So we covered the motor and drive space fairly broadly. We've always historically covered what I would consider like the general purpose motor market, which is 690 volts and less. That's what we would consider the low voltage motor market. What we're looking at here is a really, really different space. We're looking at motors and drives that are 60 volts and less. There's a couple important reasons for that 60 volt threshold. One of them is it's an important cutoff point for UL standards. Beneath 60 volts, there's not really as much risk for being electrocuted. So there's a lot less red tape in terms of becoming UL certified. The other important characteristic of less than 60 volts is that it includes most of the battery architectures. So 24 volt and 48 volt batteries that are used really heavily in industrial applications, primarily in mobile robotics. That's another important reason why this less than 60 volt threshold exists. So when we're referring to ultra low voltage motor and drives, it refers to motors and drives with an input voltage of 60 and less.
Okay. Now, in your report from last month, you mentioned that double-digit growth is projected for this industry over the next several years as demand is increasing. Is it all being fueled by the robotics industry, or are there other industries contributing to this double-digit growth?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of industries that are growing very quickly, that are driving growth of these products. It's very hard to overstate how important the mobile robotics sector is, though, for this particular market. Mm-hmm. Again, it goes back to what I was saying, that they're predominantly 48 volt batteries that are driving these mobile robots. So as we're seeing those adopted really, really quickly, the adoption of ultra low voltage motors is kind of growing in step. And we're seeing that market grow exponentially at the moment. So as a result, the ultra low voltage motor market is growing exponentially alongside. Outside of robotics, there's a couple of other interesting areas that are fueling growth. So roller conveyors is a trend that we see in intralogistics, particularly in the warehouse automation space. We are seeing their use effectively double over the course of our forecast period. That's another strong driver of growth. They're predominantly using 12 volt or 24 volt motors to drive those roller conveyors. And then lastly, I would point to packaging machinery. I find packaging machinery to be a really interesting use case for ultra low voltage motors. There's a real heavy driver towards increasing flexibility in packaging machines because of all the changes that are coming down the line regarding sustainability in packaging. All these packaging materials are really starting to change form and shape, and the machines need to be flexible enough to compensate for that. So what engineers are doing and machine designers is they're putting a lot more automation into these auxiliary functions, these smaller functions that are manipulating whatever's being packaged. And those are using very small motors, very small actuators. So it's a really good use case for these ultra low voltage motors as well.
Yeah. And Brianna, from a technology standpoint, have there been any innovations or improvements? I know Blake alluded to a few, but have you noticed any innovations or improvements that are helping fuel this industry growth? And if so, what would you say they are?
Yes, absolutely. From the technology side, when we look at the motors, we're seeing a trend towards the integration of these ultra low voltage motors and drives, and this especially supports applications in mobile robotics, industrial robotics as well. But we see strong growth of this product type in mobile robotics by reducing the footprint of the drive system. So it frees up a lot of space within design, also reduces the need for cabling and kind of reduces bill of materials that way in a lot of mobile robot design. So that's one way. And from a machinery standpoint, it's just like what Blake is saying, especially within packaging and other warehouse and logistic applications, we're seeing smaller points of actuation due to the flexibility of the need of a variety of product types. So that just means more points of actuation driven by all these ultra low voltage motors.
So it does sound like that there is a lot of potential for innovation, and we'll touch on some of that a little later on. But I wanted to kind of pivot slightly toward the industry as a whole. And Blake, your report had mentioned the market is very fragmented right now, but there's also a lot of potential for growth as well. So with all this growth happening, do you see consolidation becoming a thing?
I think consolidation is probably not the right word. What we see so this market for the area that we looked at, so the motors serving mobile robots and the like, it's growing really, really quickly, and it's gaining the attention of some of the larger industrial conglomerates. So we expect to see more acquisitions happen as a mechanism for these larger industrial companies getting into the market. So we saw on the ultra low voltage drive side, there was a company called Elmo, who produces a lot of these board level drives in a lot of industrial applications. Bosch Rexroth acquired them a little over a year ago. That was one of the largest acquisitions we'd seen in this space. We anticipate to see more of that as the market progresses and companies kind of carve out more of their own expertise in given applications. The mobile robotics sector, again, I think is going to drive a lot of consolidation kind of naturally. Whoever can develop competencies in that sector, they're going to start gaining share hand over fist just because of the organic growth that's happening in that area. And because it's a very like OEM, it is an OEM driven market. The relationships that suppliers have with those mobile robot providers are going to allow them to grow really, really heavily and gain share very quickly. So, yeah, I wouldn't say consolidation is happening like we see in some other markets, but we do expect acquisitions to occur as this becomes more of an attractive space for vendors to enter.
And Brianna, all this growth is great for the industry, but we're still having supply chain issues in the US and really worldwide. And even with the growth, are the supply chain issues stifling what could be even greater industry growth, do you think?
I think so, but there's also a bright side here where the supply chain is definitely easing up as we speak. So just from doing our research between February and August of this year, supplier sentiment definitely brightened as time went on. I would say definitely the drives industry is more heavily impacted from the semiconductor side than the motor industry, but it seems like the situation is improving by the day.
That is good news. And we hadn't really touched on semiconductors, and but they are having an enormous impact, in the US, particularly in the US, with these facilities coming up. So it'll be interesting to see what impact that has. Blake, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on what that might do as more facilities come online?
Yeah, so we constantly hear. So I recently did a project that worked a lot more closely with machine builders than some of the other markets that we cover. And it was interesting to hear their perspective because they were saying, we can get all the equipment kind of on time that we need now. We just cannot get controllers and drives because of this lasting semiconductor shortage. But those lead times are beginning to come down. So when we talk to drive suppliers, for instance, their lead times are returning to what I would consider like a normal level. There was at one point at the height of the supply chain crisis where they were out out almost 52 weeks in some cases. They're now back down to the 12-week threshold that is considered normal. So yeah, I think it's an indication that even the worst constraint that we've had in the supply chain, which is the semiconductor shortage, is starting to ease. So we might be kind of at the end of the really intense supply chain shortages that we've seen for 2 years.
Sure. Either of you can answer this question, but one thing we hadn't really touched on is as these ultra low voltage motors get more sophisticated and powerful, and I suppose this is true for all technologies, but in this particular subset, has there been an effort from what you've seen to make them more energy efficient and sustainable, since that seems to be the watchword of the day is sustainability?
Yeah, we definitely hear more circular economy rhetoric being thrown around. It hasn't been as prevalent in conversations in history as it has been today, I would say. So motor vendors are starting to design into their products the ability to recycle key components. That's definitely new. I think it's a future trend still, but it is happening. On the energy efficiency side, there is an inherent need for efficiency with these motors because they're a part of a battery-driven system. So they want to make the battery last as long as possible. I would say for ultra low voltage motors, the energy efficiency probably isn't as important as some of the like more general purpose motors that you hear about. Only because like a lot of the applications that they're using, for instance, mobile robotics, even though they're battery driven, they're fairly easy to charge up quickly. So there's not as much incentive there to make the battery last a super long time. Yeah, unlike like automotive, for instance, where it's obviously a huge consideration. So yeah, on the energy efficiency side, I think it's probably less of a driving force for ultra low voltage motors than it is for traditional motor markets, but it's important nonetheless.
Yeah. Brianna, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think Blake pretty much covered it.
Okay. So I'll get you out of here on this question, asking you to, get out your crystal balls here, but what do you think the ultra low voltage motor and drive industry will look like beyond the 5-year window that you had highlighted in your report? What do you see, or what do you think will happen in 2028 and beyond?
Bree, do you want me to start this one?
I can start.
Okay.
I think the landscape is definitely shifting in the motor market in a major way towards mobile and industrial robotics, mostly mobile robotics. So currently in the last year, mobile robotics made around roughly 5% of the market. But in 2027, they'll account for nearly a third of the ultra low voltage motor market. And we expect that to increase as the adoption of mobile robots proliferates among OEMs. So that's definitely a shift that we anticipate coming.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, we constantly are hearing of growth in the warehouse automation landscape. So areas like automated storage and retrieval systems, sortation systems, even the roller conveyors that we were talking about, we are going to see those expand drastically beyond our forecast. So those are going to continue being drivers of growth and pointing back to the packaging machinery and the need for flexibility in machines. You're kind of like getting to this point in industrial automation where the emphasis was on throughput, and it's now moving, in addition to throughput, to being flexible, and having more points of automation that you can control very tightly is going to be really crucial for that. So that bodes really, really well for growth of these products beyond our forecast for a long time. Industrial robots are another area. So we continue to hear of the use of collaborative robots. Those tend to be handling smaller payloads, so they can be operated at these kind of ultra low voltage range. It's less of a driving force than some other areas, but it still will continue to drive growth in this market going forward. Yeah, I think those are the key things that we point to. I think there's good days to come for this market for quite some time.
Sure sounds like it, and flexibility along with throughput. That's going to be, I think, a key for every industry out there, not just robotics and motors and drives. So I'll be very interested to see what the next few years look like. But well, thank you, Blake and Brianna, for joining me today and sharing your thoughts on this industry. This was very insightful and some really good commentary on where the industry is and where the industry is heading. So thank you very much again for your time today.
Thank you
Yeah.
for having us, Chris.
Yeah, thanks as always, Chris. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And I'm Chris Vavra. I'm the web content manager for CFE Media and Technology. If you enjoyed today's video, we have many other interviews on YouTube and on the websites controleng.com and planengineering.com for you to take a look at. So thank you again for joining us today.